Hello, enlightened fantasy fans. It's Hoodoo Joe with another episode of Fantasy or Prehistory. We're discussing the upcoming season of Game of Thrones, and we'll be using information from trailers, leaks, leaked scenes, and tinfoil theories from the Game of Thrones community. So if that ain't cool with you, better click another thumbnail now. If you found this video, chances are you've already heard a lot of the community's theories on the new season. It's pretty well established that Dany will be arriving on Dragonstone early on, that Yara and Theon will be sent to Dorne to meet with the Sandsnakes and then be captured by Euron, and that Euron will use them to broker a deal with Cersei, which probably involves marriage. At the end of Season 6, I did a video that predicted the pact between Cersei and Euron, but my reasoning wasn't based on leaks, and I think it's important to briefly revisit those reasons in light of the new information. The new trailers are showing all-out war in Westeros, and I just don't think war is even a possibility while Cersei and King's Landing are in their current weak condition. It would not be a war, it would be an absolute massacre. You've got Dany, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, 3 full-size dragons, the North, Melisandre, and some other red priests, plus Highgarden, Dorne, and the Vale against the King's Guard, the Mountain, and a single pyromancer. That's not even a challenge, and stakes get higher in great novels, not lower. What's more, we should know by now that each new spotlight villain in Game of Thrones must be meaner and more depraved than the last. Despite Cersei being a mass murderer, she does not fit the bill. There is no way that she can rise up to the level of Ramsay on the fan hatred index meter. But Euron can, easily. He's a slightly more psychopathic version of Ramsay with magic added, and he has in his possession a horn with the power to control or kill dragons. I go more into depth on this in the video from last year, so here's the link. I do want to add that the new leaks seem to indicate that a dragon will die in the north and be raised as an undead dragon by the White Walkers. I don't know if this will be due to Euron using the horn or whether Euron will be stealing a different dragon than the one the White Walkers obtained. It's possible that Dany ends up with only Rhaegal, but I do know this. Euron is in league with the White Walkers and with the Great Other. There are several Easter eggs in the books which seem to point to this, and I also think it's necessary for the last major villain to be on the Great Other's team in order for us to finally come to understand and truly be impacted by what the White Walkers really are. I think we're going to learn what they really are through Euron and the revelations of what he was really doing in his past when he was away from the Iron Islands. It's very possible that there's a big twist coming in which Euron betrays all of mankind to the Great Other. I'm also holding out for Dany and Jon to actually reawaken an army of dragons from stone like Azor Ahai from the rock of Dragonstone itself. But that's something else that is also covered in my old predictions video. Imagine a climax that fills your screen with dragons. Also, in one of the trailer scenes, we see a multitude of dragon bones being made for the set. My guess is that it's for a scene in King's Landing, and I wonder if the Night's King might be able to raise them all by Season 8, with the help of Euron. It would certainly make a climactic ending to see an army of undead dragons versus an army of stone ones. Most likely, you already know about the expedition beyond the wall to retrieve evidence of the existence of whites that's undertaken by Jon, Beric, Thoros, Gendry, Jorah, the Hound, and possibly Davos. Some sources are saying that both Beric and Thoros died during the expedition when the party is surrounded by whites and White Walkers. Others are saying that everyone dies but Jon, who was saved by Benjen Coldhands and Daenerys' dragons. My observation is that at least the Hound must survive because we see him later in what looks like the King Landing's arena, where he and Jon are presumably showing their captured white to Cersei. I would bet that Jorah and Davos survive as well, as their character arcs cannot possibly be completed at this juncture, and Gendry has to survive to reforge a certain sword. A very knowledgeable Game of Thrones reader named Steve, who we'll have on later, has recently shared with me his theory of the Hound's ultimate climax and demise. It's almost certain that Sandor's character arc will culminate in getting over his fear of fire in some way, and it would be just about perfect for him to meet his end by defending Sansa from the Whites and White Walkers with fire, like a branding torch or something like that. I really like the idea of the Hound and Sansa becoming lovers in the end, an idea put forth by the Small Council YouTube group. But whether they do or not, I think that the resolution of their story will revolve around restoring both their faith and the possibility of honor among knights, or knight-like heroes. Sandor, too, seems to have loved knights as a kid, but was turned off to the idea by his brother's sadism, just as Sansa was turned off from such fancies by Joffrey's cruelty. You've also probably already heard about Jaime giving the Queen of Thorns poison to save her from a worse fate when he takes Highgarden for Cersei, which certainly seems like the case from the brief scene we get of the two in the previews. However, we must take all of this with a grain of salt because Kit Harington has admitted to the media that 3 fake scenes were filmed to throw the paparazzi off. We could also be experiencing misdirection in the trailers. Maybe that's not what Jaime is handing the Queen of Thorns. Although I don't think that they would use a false clip for a trailer. It's also recently been leaked that Sam will discover something important at the Citadel in the episode 1 of Season 7, and as many have speculated, it's probably Jon's true origins as well as a new way to fight the White Walkers. Some of the scenes also show him working in the lab with another Maester, and another Maester has been cast for most of the episodes in this season. We think that this Maester and Sam will also discover a cure for grayscale, and that Jorah will accompany Sam to the Wall to give Jon the new information he's discovered, which will result in the expedition beyond the Wall, which gets Beric and Thoros presumably killed. Now I want to spend a little time talking about Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, and the prophecies of the last hero of the Long Night. Recently I've been watching a lot of great community videos building cases for characters other than Jon Snow being Azor Ahai. Some of these are very convincing. Euron's story is very much like that of the last hero, the Drowned God, and the original king of the Iron Isles, the Grey King. He was reborn amid salt and smoke when he tied himself to a mast like Odysseus so that he could hear the song of the metaphorical sirens. Jaime Lannister also fits the bill. After he loses his hand, therefore losing his old identity, he's reborn amid salt and smoke when he's in the hot tub with Brienne. And this is the first time we ever see any of his weaknesses so that we can actually sympathize with his character. Jorah, too, is rife with symbology, recalling the legends of Azor Ahai, the prince, and the last hero, as well as the Hound, Dany, Davos, Tyrion, Samwell, Bran, Sansa, Arya, and even Cersei and Benjen Stark. And this isn't just tinfoil conjecture. Some of the Easter eggs that theorists have pointed out cannot be a mere coincidence. It's almost as if George Martin is using Azor Ahai, or the last hero's journey, as a template for all of his main characters' story arcs. All of these characters have something in their rebirth that signifies smoke and fire, and something that might be seen as several attempts to forge a literal or metaphoric perfect weapon by sacrificing something of themselves or something of one of their loved ones. I'm not going to take time here pointing out all of the evidence for each of those, as many others have already done so, and a quick search for who is Azor Ahai will yield you hours of entertainment on YouTube. But the point I want to make here is that Martin is including these equations on purpose, and I don't think we will have real confirmation of who is Azor Ahai, because Azor Ahai is no one, and at the same time, he is all of them. Sansa will also play a necessary part, one that can't be accomplished without the sacrifice of Sandor Clegane. For the world of men to arise triumphant, Jaime will have to sacrifice his Nissa, in other words, his sister Cersei. Arya's part in the war will also be no less than Jon Snow's, or Dany's, who is Azor Ahai, is a matter of perspective rather than fact, and always will be. We will still be able to debate the question long after the series of books are over. Just like the characters in Martin's world seem confused over whether the prince, Azor, and the last hero are the same people, so in the future they might have different opinions on which of these characters saved Westeros from the Long Night. If you are a citizen of King's Landing at the end, you might say Jaime saved you when it's all over. If you live in the north, you might say Jon Snow, and if you're Dothraki or Unsullied, you might say Dany. And all of these heroes might become confused with each other in the future, just like the heroes of legend seem to be confused with each other in the lore. I don't think the prince that was promised is the same person as Azor Ahai or the prince or the last hero. I think these are all cultural heroes that saved different peoples or nations during the last long night, and I think their stories are also similar because it requires certain steps to save your people from a long night. For instance, many of the gods, kings, and heroes in their origin stories of various peoples such as the Ironborn, Stone Men, Northerners, Dornish, and others go through a death and rebirth that's accompanied by the help of a woman or being with blue eyes and cold lips who seems to be associated with White Walkers, children of the forest, and the Drowned God. Perhaps only a person who has been altered by the magic of the Great Other has any hope of defending their people from his power, and it's always been like that. I learned from the famous psychologist and prehistoric researcher Stan Gooch that when many theories, all based on sound research and data, seem to be true, and yet also seem to contradict one another, it's possible that they could all be correct, and the contradiction is only because of an erroneous perspective. Maybe the legends are not all speaking of the same cultural hero. Maybe no one is Azor Ahai or the prince that was promised, but all of the heroes have traits and journeys in common with each other that will perpetuate such legends in the future nonetheless. When I realized this might be the case, I did a search trying to find out if anyone else had come to this conclusion previously, and found a very interesting video by the Israeli Game of Thrones theorist GoT Academy, and found that they actually go into a lot more depth with this theory, citing historical instances where the same thing has happened in the real history books. We won't ever get an answer as to who is really Azor Ahai in A Song of Ice and Fire. But having said that, I'd like to interject that Bran is probably the most important hero in the story. He's been going back to all times since the story began, and is actually all of the Brans from history, and possibly one incarnation of him as even the Night's King himself. He may be the person who began the long night through some terrible mistake, and has been trying for an eternity to correct the error. The current story is just the time in which he finally got it right, and maybe he's had to alter all of the lives of the aforementioned heroes to do so. Was it Bran who led Bran to the tower in order to discover Jaime and Cersei? Did future Bran want current Bran to be a cripple, so that he'd finally live to adulthood and finally accomplish his goal? The last few Brans on record were rash and bold and died before their prime, just as little Bran was when he was so quick to climb the towers. I go into this more in a past episode. You can see it right here via the card if you're interested. I'll wrap up with just a few more predictions before the season starts. I don't think there's going to be a Clegane Bowl, even though there will be a reference to it when the Hound, Jorah, and Jon display their captured white in King's Landing. I do think that the Hound will eventually kill his brother, but only with the help of Arya. I think there's still the possibility of a Lady Stoneheart in the series, despite the fact that the Hound pissed in the river, but I think it's a slim chance, and honestly, I don't really care. There are several characters from the books that I miss a lot more than Lady Stoneheart. Strong Belwas, for instance. And I also want to deliver a bomber about Miss Stark to those of you who don't know. Catelyn Stark was not only a conniving idiot who got a lot of people killed and started a war, but she had a much darker agenda than most people realize. A rereading of her first chapter in the book, Game of Thrones, reveals that she conspired with Master Luwin to get Jon sent to the Wall in order to protect the future of her other children, which means that she must have known that Jon Snow could be a more legitimate heir than Robb or any of the others. I don't think she knows he's a Targaryen. I think she believes he might be a legitimate product of Ned's annulled marriage to Ashara Dane. There's good evidence that Ned Stark was married and in love with Ashara Dane before being forced to marry Catelyn after his big brother's death. Whether Lady Stoneheart appears or not, we will soon learn of a deeper plot involving Catelyn, Littlefinger, and Luwin. And I'm not sure that Peter's claim of taking Catelyn's maidenhead is a total fabrication born of Lysa having impersonated her sister on a drunken night. Perhaps one of the things that Sam discovers at the Citadel is that Ned was previously married and that the powers that be had that marriage annulled, forcing him to take up his brother's Grail and marry Catelyn. That's all I'm going to say for now, but I hope you'll please subscribe and tune in next week to discuss Episode 1 of the new season and what it will mean for Episode 2. My band and I are also currently recording Game of Thrones songs on prehistoric instruments we've built right here at Mirkwood Farms. The first song we've released is Jerimond, a song from the Clash of Kings that has never been performed before, and you can hear it right here on our channel. We'd like to tackle all the songs from the books, especially the ones that haven't been set to music yet, and there are a whole bunch of them. So if you have a song from A Song of Ice and Fire that you really like to see music set to, please let us know which one in the comments, and we'll try to have it prioritized. We'd also love to hear what you think of the theories discussed in this episode of Fantasy or Prehistory. And if there's something you'd like for us to discuss further in the next video, please let us know. Don't forget to like, it helps a lot, and we'll see you next time on the Looters Review channel.